Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining the session today. We've got some exciting topics to discuss. I want to make sure that everyone's set up for success as they start going through their workplace service delivery implementation. So during the session today, we're going to be focused really around getting started with space management. So if you joined us last week, we had a dedicated session on different capabilities that we have to offer within workplace service delivery in terms of space management. How can we utilize the tool to take action and make sure we can optimize the space office we have, taking into account the various data we have? So the session today is really focused around to get to that experience, making sure we have the foundation set up and making sure you have the options to have different configurations to make sure you can then use those experiences. So I'm excited to be joined with a couple of colleagues today. We'll be running this session throughout the hour. So just going to move on to the next slide. So just some few housekeeping rules just before we get started. We have a Q&A function, so if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to paste them in the Q&A. We prefer the Q&A to the chat, but if you also want to use the chat, we're also open to answering there. We'll try and go through the Q&A as we go through the session. If there's any question that we think could benefit the group, we'll make sure to bring it up and then answer that live. We can also get back to you directly via that Q&A, but also if you have additional questions, we'll make sure to follow up with you after the session. Just so that everyone notes, if you have to step out or if you've got a colleague that could not join or you'd like to catch up and rewatch the session at a later date, this session is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to find it on Community within roughly a week after the actual event, so you can expect to see the live recording directly in Community and on YouTube by next week. And then lastly, at the end of the session, you'll be prompted with a quick survey. So this is really our way of gathering feedback on how we're doing with these sessions. Are these helpful for you as you go through your implementation journey? Is it also helpful for you to really better understand some of the capabilities we have within the product? And then if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask specifically to the session we're having today or more generally on WSD, feel free to put those in the survey and then we'll follow up with you based on what you input there. So the session we'll be delivering today is really to show you how to configure the art of the possible of what is in the capability today within space management, but also within some of the other plugins that kind of intertwine with space management. We might mention some forward-looking statements in terms of roadmap. We might allude to some information that might be coming out in the future. So we do want to mention the safe harbor just because if we do allude to some of these, the scope of what we might mention might change, but also timing wise, if we do mention some dates, so please be aware of that. But just again to highlight what we're presenting today is really what is available out of the box if you have workplace service delivery. So joining me today, I have a few members of the team that will be joining. So I have Paulina, who is on the outbound product management team for workplace service delivery. I have Alex, who is part of our product excellence group. So he's an architect within that specific group. So he can really give you tips and tricks around how customers have already implemented, but also recommendations on how to do some of the configurations. And then myself, I'm also part of the outbound product management team. So quick preview of the agenda and kind of how we've structured the presentation today and how we're going to go through these different steps. I'm going to start by giving you a very brief overview of space management, just in case you didn't join the session last week, just so that you have that foundation of how we visualize space management within workplace service delivery. We're then going to go over some key components to make sure that once you do want to utilize this capability and want to start using the experience we have, making sure that you're set up for success. So this goes by looking at your workplace data foundation. We all know here that without data, we can't make decisions, but even without even knowing what I have in my portfolio today, I could not actually adjust because I don't know what I have. So we're going to have a strong focus on that foundation piece. We're then going to look into some assignments and allocations. So this is assigning spaces and employees, making sure I have the right groups, making sure I have the right allocations so I can then do chargebacks. And then lastly, we'll be focusing on, it's all good that I've got my data and my assignments and my allocations set up in the system. However, I'm including a new building or I'm having a restructure or I need to include more data or edit the data I currently have today. We're going to give you a quick preview of some of the latest enhancements we've done to the product to really facilitate the way you do those. We then have kept time at the end to go through Q&A. However, as I did mention, we can go through, as we go through the different topics today, we can also mention some of those questions bring them to the group if we think they're valuable for all. And then lastly, we'll follow up with a few available resources if you want to get to know more information, if you'd like to get to know some of the other applications we have within the WSD suite. We'll provide you with different links to go there. So starting on what is space management. So space management is really designed for teams to make sure that they can have one location where they can have the source of truth for all their space, understanding their current portfolio, but also then understanding how these spaces are being consumed, how they're being utilized, how are they being assigned, and then make sure that we can have a plan to control these spaces. Something space might need a maintenance, a space might be blocked, or I might be building an extra floor in my location, making sure I have everything up to date in one system, but also then tracking utilization, usage to then make adjustments to it. So making sure I've got my foundation. So then when I bring in other systems, other applications, I can understand how my location is being utilized, so it can really help me make informed decision. And what space management will really help you to do is update your data, making sure that data is always up to date with the latest adjustments and changes that you're making to it. So being able to make direct action directly on your space. So different capabilities we have within space management. So understanding, first of all, with a system of truth for all of that space, whether it's through the tables and records of space, or it could also be via indoor mapping. We will have an emphasis on indoor mapping, understanding I've got my core foundation. And then adding to that, we've got several capabilities around how can I make adjustments. So providing capabilities like map-based space administration that enables me to really be able to make changes on the go, a scenario planning. So I've got a future plan of where we need to make some adjustments, but I need to really think this through. So this process could take a few months. So really looking at more strategic changes. So if you did miss the session last week, we went over a demo with an instance around some of those capabilities. Some other capabilities we mentioned are also related to move management. So being able to, as a team manager, I'm allocated certain spaces, but I need more spaces. I need to put in a request to have that space, making sure I have the right spaces proposed to me for those changes. But also as an employee, if I have a one-to-one assignment with a desk, I'd like to request a move, being able to submit all these different requests and making sure the space planner has actual access to this information and can then make the adjustments as they require. So really building that foundation is a primary way of starting with space management, making sure that you have all of your data within one single location. So that is one of the topics we're actually going to start by focusing on, is making sure we have that core data set up. So what we're going to do is take a step back and look at ServiceNow as a whole. So a lot of organizations have actually started with several different other products within ServiceNow, which have enabled them to actually create a full CMN location. The CMN location is used throughout different tasks, different assets, different profiles. It helps centralize that data in one location. What WSD does, it's an actual extension to that CMN location table. So today you might have your full CMN location set up for your other products of ServiceNow, but to make sure that we're not duplicating any of that and making sure all assets, all tags, all tasks are still associated, but linked within this new application, what WSD is an actual extension to that CMN location table. So that extension actually happens through the class field. And that class field is we have our specific hierarchy, which goes via region, site, campus, building, floor, area, and space, and really then enables to provide those same spaces within the WSD experience. So throughout the experience within WSD, you'll have this same location hierarchy. I just want to make a quick mention also of an extension also to this WSD location. We also have on the side an indoor mapping location hierarchy, but we'll get to that as we go through the presentation. So just making sure that the CMN location is not duplicated. What process that customers need to go through is really going through a classification. So not duplicating, not creating new regions that already exist, not creating buildings that already exist, but it's really using the same data that exists, but just classifying them with that new field to be able to have them then come down into the WSD location hierarchy. So an example of this is making sure that you go through a full process of understanding and analyzing the data within that CMN location. To avoid that duplication, going through this process is the initial step really to get started with not only space management, but in general WSD. This really helps you create that location directory within that location hierarchy within Workplace Core. So not all of the not every single location within your CMN location will need to be classified. However, what you can do is go through that analyze of your locations to then figure out a pattern that could be replicated. So what we've done here is provide you with an example of what this could be, what this could look like. So what we've got in the first part is really looking at the CMN location. So I had a location type that was a continent, which is North America. I had a country, and then I had a state, and then I had a city. I might have had a specific address. I might have had specific spaces. I could have a whole different variety of location types. What's then done by the workplace admin is going through that analysis to figure out what that pattern could look like, and then coordinate that and align that with the workplace locations. So as you can see, not every single one of these are specifically being aligned with WSD locations, but you can see that we saw a pattern here that North America would be the highest pillar of my location hierarchy, which would represent the region. I then have one step down of the country, USA, is going to be my site. My campus will actually be the city, and then the address will be my building. I can then see that I'm still missing some of the hierarchy. I don't have everything within my existing CMN location, so not all will be reused, but also some can be created. If they don't already exist, this is not going to duplicate them. This is going to create them of creating that smaller part of the hierarchy. So this could be a floor. This would be your specific spaces. And to create these specific floors or spaces, this can be done in two ways. It can either be done directly within the WSD, within the Workplace Core application to really be able to define those extra layers that you don't have. But you could also look at automating some of this and creating it via indoor mapping. So that is one of the parts that we want to focus on today to really show you how this information could be created and automated through indoor mapping. Some of you might already be familiar with a lot of this, but we do want to make sure that we're sharing best practices and guidance around how this could be created. So once you go down your region site region site, campus, building, floor, and then space, you can see that for space management, we have a specific view within the tool that can help you really get more granular and provide more details around each of these records. So example, on the floor level, on the building level, but also on the space level, I have the option to track my measurements. For space management, this is really useful for me as a space planner, so I can then track what is my usable square footage, what is the total square footage. I can really get that granular detail, which would also help me then when I come to my reporting tools. I also, on each of my floors, on my spaces, can do allocations. So this is really defining, are these spaces specifically allocated to a department, to a cost center, to a workplace entity? So these different concepts will also go through in more detail as we get through the presentation. But this is really to define who these spaces are managed by. So are they owned by a specific department? Are they a tenant of, is a tenant part of that certain department cost center entity? I can really go through more granularly and allocate these specific spaces. One part of the information to make it less manual is also, if I want to define this allocation specifically on the floor level, what we have is that capability to have the push down. So the push down of the allocation from a floor, which could then be pushed down to a space record or to the multiple spaces that are on that floor to do those same allocations. So you're not going through that manual process, and you can really push down the information that you've put on a higher level of that hierarchy. Through the different spaces, you also have different options to really make sure that you're tracking the space in terms of the status. Is this should this be available throughout the experience within WSD? So this means through the reservation tool, making sure that I can have assignments to it, making sure the space can be used throughout the experience. I can define the status of it. Is it active? Is it something that we're planning in the future? So it's not yet available. Is this space retired? Is a maintenance issue going against it? Does this mean it needs to be temporarily blocked? I can really define dates around that, so making sure I'm blocking it for a certain period, inputting all that information, also classifying that space of, do I want to have it for my reservation experience, where I can define this is not only a space, but it's under a certain space type, so it's under a certain category. It's a meeting room, it's a desk, it's a phone booth, it's a collaboration space, it's a quiet desk. Really being able to define all of that, and that can also go in parallel with BOMA type. So really making sure you've got all of that information within every single one of your records, making that the really system of truth of all your space, which can then be used for reporting. So if I've got all my information compiled in one location, this really facilitates then the experience of I'm not only defining my spaces, I'm providing them for a certain experience, but then also for my reporting. If I need to report on how many spaces have a certain capacity, sorry, how many spaces do I have with a certain BOMA type? What's my total usable square footage? Really being able to define granularity when it comes to reporting. So what I want to do now is make sure that we have the foundations in terms of what can be done within Workplace Core. So setting up my location, we're not duplicating the CMN location. We're making sure we're classifying that to have it within the WSD experience. This could be done as a process. If you don't have any data available today, we also have a way of automating that and creating that through indoor mapping. Indoor mapping and space management for as are intertwined, so making sure that you're not only providing that experience in list and form views to your space planners, but also as a visual way of seeing the layout either via floor plan or stack plan that we can also see later. So what I'm going to do is hand it over to Alex, who can take us through the indoor mapping portion.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So, as you mentioned, just as a brief introduction, Workplace Indoor Mapping is a plugin that helps organization enhance the workplace experience by offering interactive floor plans. Within which you have Map Studio that allows a space manager, for example, to create, edit, and manage interactive maps, to therefore help employees navigate the building, raise an issue, or even book a room. At the same time, facility managers and space planners can manage the created floor plans to optimize and manage the space usage through space administration and scenario planning. So with the Map Studio, you have two options that we will see in the next slides to import your floor plans. So you have the PNGs, or what we call the raster file. So this import will just be like a flat image, and everything will have to be manually created via the Map Studio. Where the second option is AutoCAD that will quote unquote automate the creation of your objects. All the text objects or even blocks that are found in the file can be converted into places. So the places are the interactive objects that you will have on your map, and you will have more liberty to edit and design the floor plan the way you want. As all the polylines, so that's more of an AutoCAD language, but all the lines within the file will also be converted as an object that you can edit by changing the colors, for example, or even the thickness of it. So then on the next slide, we'll see what a CAD looks like. So we can import DWG or DXF, and as we said in the previous slide, and as you might have seen, there are some steps that you need to do before importing an AutoCAD file, and we do emphasis on like reducing the details that you can find in the file, because like an AutoCAD file is basically like a raw architectural drawing with many layers that might not be used, that are too complex, or even rooms that are not even closed, and that you might not want to import in the end. Then on the next slide, we can see the common CAD issues. So here, as you can see, we have different red dots. I mean, all the text are in red. That means that the object didn't process correctly. You wanted to have polygons, but the system couldn't retrieve the enclosed polylines around it, or they might not even be enclosed. So as a result, all the places were created as points instead of polygons. But additionally, we can see that only two layers are configured, and they contains all the text object that you will see there. And we do recommend to separate the text based on their type to avoid having it to configure them manually. So here, as you can see, we just refined the file following the guidelines that we have out there on the community. So all the rooms are properly enclosed. So we decided to rename the layers so the person in charge of importing the floor plans know what they are configuring. And also they are also divided into types, as I mentioned. That's just better to just retrieve the type directly from the layer than just having to manually set it later. But then we'll jump to the different place categories. So you have the place type catalog, which is like the out of the box place types that we have on the instance. So by selecting the place type catalog, you will be able to search and define the different places that you are configuring. Then we have the option to retrieve the type from a text or a block attributes. So within AutoCAD, you have the option to define attribute definitions. And there, if you have the same place type and the same name of the place type that we have in the instance, you will be able to retrieve it directly. And then the last option is to manually set the layer for the polygon. Sorry, you will have all the place types being the same, and afterwards you will be able to edit the type one by one, or even by directly going to the table, and then you will have to change everything there. Sorry. Then we have on the next slide the option to extract the different data from the file. So the most common one is either the place type as we've just seen before, or even the measurements. So within AutoCAD, you have a unit most of the time that is defined, and then you have a size in the unit that is defined, so square feet, square meters, or even like millimeters or something else that is within the file. So whenever you have an enclosed shape, you will be able to retrieve the measurements by setting up the properties within the properties mapping part of the plugin. So that way you can have the right measurements being populated into your records. Otherwise, if you don't use that property, you will have measurements that are auto-calculated by the system based on the georeference. So that's really better to have your data being extracted directly from AutoCAD, because you're sure that all the measurements in your floor or even the buildings are the right one. Next slide, please.
So just to add on to this one, so we have those out of the box properties to track the surface, square meters, square feet, directly either from the CAD file or, as Alex mentioned, from the indoor mapping. We also have the option to create your own properties. So as I was showing you that the space record of showing you I can track the measurements. I can also look at the capacity. I can track the BOMA type. I can track the status of it. If I have more information that's already in my CAD file, I can have that populated. So let's say here the example on the screen on the second screenshot is I have information within my CAD file of the capacity. So I want to make sure that when I'm bringing my information from my CAD file, I want to make sure that this information is also associated with each of the spaces that I'll be bringing in. So I have that data pre-imported. So that will mean that workplace manager, workplace admin does not have to go in and input all that information either by a spreadsheet upload or manually inputting it. I can have all of that data in my CAD file, so making sure my CAD file is robust, has all the information I want, and then just transferring that directly into WSD, that I can have those fields populated.
And now we have the different architectural consideration and common challenges. So most of the time when we open like a raw CAD files that is not tweaked or refined, we see that most of the polygons and most of the lines, rooms, etc., are not enclosed. So just to leverage the polygon feature, the ability to convert your text objects into like a polygonal interactive item, we do recommend to enclose all the polygons and to separate the lines into several different layers. So we could have a layer for the building outline, for example. Then we could have another layer for all of the rooms within the floor, and I don't know, another layer for the inaccessible area or even the outdoor area that might be part of the floor. Then within the file, we do recommend to have one text per location. If you have like duplicates or even two texts at the same location, you might experience an issue where the text will be on top of the other one. And just for like visibility, it wouldn't be okay because you won't even be able to see the place as the other one will cover this one. Then, as we have seen, we have the categorization of our places. So that just dividing the different texts into different layers per type. The naming convention could be a bonus since most of the times the architects have like different kind of like naming convention, and it might not even reflect what is within the layer. So just for the workplace manager, just making sure that you have the right naming and a clear naming so they know what they are configured would be great. Also, we do have a feature that retains previous configuration. So if all the layers are named the same across each file that you want to import, then you just have to do the configuration once, and the system will just retrieve the configuration based on the previous import that you did. And last, we have the complexity. So what I call complexity within TOCAD could be like an object composed of many lines. For example, we do often see like chairs that are composed of, I don't know, 1,000 lines or even 1,000 points. And just to make sure that you won't have any performances issue, we do recommend to either redraw the object to just simplify them or remove the unnecessary objects that you might not want to import into the system.
I think that was great.
Yeah, we do have one last part, which is the synchronization. So once your file is loaded and once your campus is ready to be published, you have two things to do. So you have to first populate the view. So either the default view for the location directory and the resolvable module, or the scenario planning one for Workplace Central. And after that, you can synchronize your data with WSD. So if you don't have data in WSD beforehand, that's okay. Indoor mapping can populate all of the data within WSD by running the sync. Or if you have data, you need to make sure that the data in WSD and the data in your CAD file, for example, will match. So that way they will be able to link. And we do have several options within the sync or several states. So we have the ignore. So if you don't want an indoor mapping item to be populated and to be synced in WSD, you can select ignore. Create is for the object that were missing in WSD. So you might encounter that step if you didn't have any data in WSD before. Then we have the link, as I mentioned, just to link your WSD data within the mapping. And we have the keep one. And keep is that you already synced the file once, the campus once. So nothing changed. So the operation would be at keep. And lastly, we have the cleaning step or retire. So if an item disappeared from indoor mapping, you will see a new step called retire, and it will just deactivate the objects within WSD.
Yep. So just to confirm on that part, because we do get a lot of question, it deactivate it and it will not delete any of the records. So
Yeah,
making sure that information is still there, it will just be made inactive for any of the experiences available in.
yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Of
So
course.
just coming back to our main location hierarchy, so we had that discussion of CMN location is common throughout the entire ServiceNow platform. WSD is that extension to the table, so through the class field of using those same locations, making sure they're classified so no duplication is created, and then populating the WSD locations. If no, as Alex was mentioning, if you don't have any CMN locations or already available in your system, or you only have certain levels of the hierarchy, you can populate some of this, either do it manually by Excel spreadsheet uploads into WSD core, or you have the option of populating this directly from indoor mapping. So populating it from indoor mapping means starting at the campus level. So you will need to manually still create a region and a site to make sure everything is still connected. You won't be able to create a campus without having the higher levels of the hierarchy pre-populated, but you do have that option of automating the creation through indoor mapping to populate your locations. If you have it, if you don't have it, you still have the option of when you import your floor plans, making sure if you do it via CAD file, if you've got all your information in terms of, I've got my capacity in there, I've got my BOMA types in there, I've got my space measurements. I want all of this to be carried over, making sure that you set the right mapping properties to also carry that data over, and making sure you have everything in one system so it can really help you take action is something that we would strongly recommend to all our customers. So having said all of that, we're now going to move on to more of the workplace assignments and allocations. We're not going to go through the full details of how these assignments allocations can be done, what different tools are available. We really want to focus on some of the main pain points and main questions we get from a lot of customers to really provide guidance and feedback based on what we've seen customers do in terms of their implementation. First part I want to mention is workplace profiles. So every single employee within the organization that you want to assign to a specific neighborhood, a specific workplace location, they would have their own what we'd call workplace profile. So their own user profile record within WSD. What you can do with this is really define, for one, their primary location. So their primary location is where they're expected to be most of the time. So meaning throughout the experience, let's take the example of Alex's primary location is based in Paris on a certain desk. If I, as an employee, as his colleague, go and search for him within the location directory to see where he's located, that is where he'll be shown on the map as his primary location. Having said that, employees can have multiple assignments. They can be assigned to multiple either locations, but only one will be primary. But they can also be assigned to multiple different neighborhoods. So we'll go through the concept of neighborhoods, but this assignment can either be done firstly strictly from the workplace profile, but this could also then be done via scenario planning and map-based space administration. So when I want to do this more in bulk, if I want to assign in bulk and have a visual way of seeing it on the map, I would use some of the capabilities we have today in the product to really use that map view via map-based space administration to really specify how I want those employees to be assigned to a desk. So this is really if you want to assign them to a specific desk within your organization. Another way of doing it is if Alex is assigned to a specific desk in Paris, he's by the radiator, he gets really warm, or he's by the light, he doesn't like working in the area, he'd like to request a move to a different location. We went through last week how that could be created, and once that is actually executed, that is going to update his workplace location. So making sure that you have that latest data of where that employee is will really help your other employees really, when they search for them, get on the map the understanding of where they actually physically are. But that would also help the space planner know that, okay, his location's been updated, but my tool is still up to date because I've got the latest information related to that specific employee. Another way of allocating a primary location would be using the schedule planner. So the schedule planner is a tool that a space planner, a project manager can actually use to say that we have a specific project. Let's say Alex is working on a project for the next 2 weeks. He needs to be working within a specific team in a specific location. I would like to assign these desks for that period of time for this specific employee. And that by doing that schedule planner, that will automatically also update his primary location. And then last but not least, because we also get quite a few of these requests specifically in EMEA for GDPR compliance, making sure that these workplace profiles, even though they have primary locations and assignments, making sure the employee can really select if their location is private or not. So really enabling that privacy capability at the workplace profile level. Moving on to some other concepts that we have. So we have neighborhoods. Neighborhoods is really a concept that we brought through after really mainly focusing on areas. So areas is a concept that we don't see many customers utilizing. This is something we've kind of moved away from to really emphasize on a new way of working, which are neighborhoods. So neighborhoods would be groups of spaces where spaces are assigned to the neighborhood, but also employees are assigned to the neighborhood. These could be public, so meaning only people that are assigned within that neighborhood would have access, could work in those locations, or they could be sorry, that was restricted, but public could be there open to every single one. So this would be reflected through different experiences we have within WST. And the idea behind this is you would create specific neighborhoods, could either be by campus or by specific location. But what the way that we have the vision of creating this and how we've seen a lot of organizations actually implement this is creating neighborhoods that are the same across the globe. So Alex could be working in the finance neighborhood in the Paris office. However, he could also have access to the neighborhood of finance in the London location, in the New York location, in Sydney. He would have access throughout. So it's really defining one neighborhood and then assigning the different spaces globally that would be part of this specific neighborhood. I can do these assignments by bulk, so assigning multiple spaces at once, or I could go through it and manually assign space by space, user by user. What we've done within the neighborhood is also provide that capability to do it by bulk. So this could also be done in the view that I'm currently showing. But as we saw last week, there's also the option of being able to do it directly from a map view. So being able to really visualize the layout of my location. So I can really assign the specific spaces looking at that map view, which really helps that space planner visualize what they're doing rather than looking at the lists and forms where they might not be so familiar with the names of the locations or the exact names of the spaces. They can easily do that by circling them directly on the map. So a way to do the bulk assignment specifically for the users, so for each of the employees that will be assigned to that neighborhood, they can easily create assignment rules. So looking at specific set of filters that the workplace admin can create, saying to be part of this neighborhood, I want everyone within that is assigned to the finance cost center or department, if I have those set up within their workplace profile, to be associated to this neighborhood. So I would be able to configure these different rules and then making sure that if I want this data to always be up to date, configuring these rules that will actually run daily, so it will always check on the different rules that you've set. So being able to specifically assign those people to a specific neighborhood. So to go throughout that experience we have within WST. Cost center, department, workplace entities. So these are allocations of looking at the specific floor or specific space. The allocations can be done at different levels. You have the option also to define start date, end date. So spaces, floors can have multiple allocations. So you can really define if one space, one floor has one, has three, has five different allocations. So you can really define all of that. But you could also, as a space planner, have this dynamically. So making sure that I've got these certain spaces because I know there's a project currently going on, or I've got more of the finance team than HR for the next 3 months. I can really define how the allocations will go. So let's say I've got one department, in this example on the screen, I've got marketing that is allocated to this specific space for a couple of months. So starting in December and then ending in April. And then in April, those spaces will be made available for the team that's working in the sales department. So you can really go through the granularity of who you're allocating these spaces to, but also do I have an end date and start date? So you can't populate the end date without having a start date, and these fields aren't mandatory. So you can really define that based on how your organization is operating. We also have the option as we're going through these different allocations is to set up the allocation profiles of these spaces, tenants or owners. So really depending on those profiles that you have for each of those spaces. So you then define if they're owners or tenants, and then based on if you've got multiple in there, you can also define the percentage. So this would always have to add up to 100. So if the owners, making sure that if you've got two, if you've got three, if you've got five, the numbers of the percentage actually add up to 100. Same for tenant. If I've got two tenants, it could be 50-50, it could be 40-60. I can really define that percentage and that granularity, making sure I have all of that information. And then last but not least, as I was mentioning previously, that push down capability. If I define all of this on the floor level and all the spaces act in the same way as I've done the allocation for the floor, what I can do is just push down from the floor table, push down that information down to all the spaces. So I'm not manually doing again all those different allocations and setting up that data, I can have that data from the floor replicated down to my space level. So just to recap this can be done by department, this can be done by cost center, and this can be done by workplace entity. There's no one stopping you from saying that one space has one cost center and two departments allocated to it. You can really define that granularity. And I do want to mention, if you're not so familiar, workplace entity is a concept that we've included really to provide more flexibility to organizations to really define their own hierarchy. So this is really going above department and cost center. This is really defining my own custom hierarchy. It could start at the corporate level, then go down to the market level. This could down to the business unit level, the project team, the engineering team. We could really have different levels. By default, we have the option of setting up 15 different levels within the workplace entity, but this can easily also be adjusted if more are required. I just want to move on. So a lot of these different changes, so the allocations I was mentioning previously, can be done via that space record, the floor record, but this can also be done using some of our capabilities. So scenario planning, map-based space administration, these are both capabilities that can be accessed via Workplace Central. So really providing that visual way for a space planner to really understand the layout of their space and then take action on it. So from these different views, of the map, I can actually define how I want to do my grouping. So how do I want to visualize the floor plan? So you saw on that space record that I have the option to allocate it to a neighborhood, a cost center, department, workplace entity. I have information on the space status, the space function, the space type. I can really define how I would like to view that. So what we've done within these two capabilities is really enable you to define that view. So we've got a lot of them out of the box, so the ones you can see on the screen are out of the box. However, you can go in the system and easily adjust, make sure that you set the one of your preference as default, so it'll always show you the map-based space administration with that default view, so you don't have to go and change the view by each time you go and look at that map. You can also define in which order the list should be shown to you, and that can easily be done by the space management view configuration. We've also have more flexibility into that in terms of if you've got a different way of how you would like to visualize the data on the floor plan, you might want to be able to see, show me the map, but have a view by capacity. You can really set up that configuration. So that would require more configuration on your side in terms of setting up that view. So it would be a configuration view for you where you can really define what specific way would you like to show that information. So that can easily be done. And if that's something of interest for someone, we can also share more details specifically on how to get that created. So I'm now going to move on to the last piece of this is another capability that we have the option to actually configure. So I was mentioning earlier the use case of I've done my assignments, so I don't have one-to-one assignments on my desks. I have my assignments done specific to teams, specific to a neighborhood, specific to a department, a workplace entity, a cost center. But I want to allow my managers to say, okay, I've got a team of 10 people. You've given me 10 desks as part of my finance department. Let's take that same example. My team is now growing. We're now going to be 15 on the team. I don't have enough space within the current workspaces that have been assigned to my specific cost center. How can I make that request? So what those managers would do is use a capability we call the space recommender. So they would input the information of why would they need more space, explain the current reasons, explain that they're allocated by department, so input that specific form, and then the system would recommend spaces for them that they could have within their department. Of course, all of this will go through approval and will go through a space request to the space manager, but what can actually be done here is really define the set of rules that are behind this engine. So when the system will be prompted with the request from that team manager, the system will show them spaces that are available. Three different options will be shown, showing them the map view of what those spaces could look like, and will show them a percentage of how much does the result fit the request that was input. So what you can really do is configure that result, making sure that you're either having the specific condition of they need to meet the full requirements to have the results shown to them. You could have an advanced script to really ensure from the space table what should be taken into account to show those spaces. But you could also input, so this is by default, but you could also remove this. The results that are shown are going to ignore all the spaces that are blocked. So we assume if they block, they can't be used, so they won't be shown to the manager that's actually looking at finding those new spaces. Or you could have also have a rule that looks at proximity, making sure that you have to have the exact proximity with your cost center department for the spaces to be shown. So this will reflect also in the percentage of the result based on your rule, what the request has been. So it might not always work out for the manager, but rest assured, all these requests that come in from the space recommender will create space requests that then get approval by certain teams and by the space planner before actually affecting real production. So you're giving them that opportunity to request more space, to select the spaces. However, the space planner still has the full capability of accepting these changes, approving them before anything gets reassigned. And then once they get reassigned, this will update all the information that we just went through in terms of the allocation of those spaces. So what I'm going to do now is hand it over to Paulina because we've gone through quite a bit of content, but we also want to make sure that we're sharing with you some of the new capabilities. We probably know that a couple of you on the session today are familiar with some of this, are already live with the tool, are already utilizing it. So it was more of a refresher or maybe some new parts of the product that you weren't so familiar with. But what we want to do now is show you kind of a preview of how you would update some of this space data. So I'll hand it over to Paulina.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, like Elizabeth said, we're very excited to share the newest feature releases that we have as of our July release. And they're both for updating the data from our maps and our spaces. So the first one on our release is the indoor mapping bulk updates. And we know that if you're familiar with loading your maps and doing all that process, it can be quite time consuming to have to update a map the way that it was previously done before. You would need to update or upload one file at the time. And then also the process would require the map admin to be quite involved throughout it. So they would need to supervise how it was running and just kind of like be alert to any errors that were raised throughout the process. But as of this release, we have enhanced the way that that works by allowing to upload multiple maps at the same time. It is important to point out here that the updates to the maps need to be for those who have already been pre-configured and set up. At a future time, we will look into adding bulk uploads for maps from the beginning, but for now, it's mostly just for updates. But yeah, basically, the user would upload a few maps into indoor mapping, and then from there, they would run in the background. There's also an option to enable notifying the user, so that way it can be run in the back without waiting on the processing. And lastly, errors and updates are going to be logged, and they're going to be helpful for troubleshooting or tracking any progress. And then the second updates that we have, if you go into the next slide, is the bidirectional. If you go into the next slide, please. Thank you so much. If you go into the indoor mapping and WSD data sync, we have now enabled the option for a bidirectional data sync. And so basically what this means is that any changes made on indoor mapping or in WSD will be reflected automatically in the system. So let's say you go into indoor mapping and you want to add a new building. Previously, you would have to update that as well in WSD, but that is no longer the case. Any changes made there will be reflected and vice versa. And another cool thing that was added is the validation steps for removed data. So basically, if anything gets removed in any of the systems, the map admin or the workplace admin will be able to track these items that were deleted, and they're going to be able to identify where was the issue and how to recover it. So this again saves a lot of times for those who handle maps, and we're very excited to share more about these two newly added features. Like Elizabeth was saying, this is just a quick preview, but we are so excited to share more about them on our blog, which I believe Elizabeth has already added on the chat. In the blog, you're going to be able to find a step-by-step on how to use these new features, along with some screenshots. And then also we have our What's New webinar coming up on August 21st, where we're going to do more of a deep dive into these new features that were released. And we're also going to be doing a demo to show you how it works and how you would go along with this process. But we're so excited about this release, and we really hope that these features and enhancements are going to make the process much smoother and just more efficient for everybody. So With that being said, I'll pass it back to you, Elizabeth. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paulina. So I have added a couple of links throughout the session directly within the chat. So if you're still looking at getting started with indoor mapping, you'll find in the chat we've got a resource that really compiles some of the articles we have of really getting started from creating that CAD file to making sure that you have the right setup for your location data, for also enabling the wayfinding, enabling it throughout different capabilities within WSD. You also have the link, as Paulina was mentioning, to the latest and greatest of what was released in July. But we also have other resources of where you can get more information. So product documentation, of course, will show you a lot of the technical configuration of how you can go through really with the out-of-box capabilities and making sure you're set up for success. Community is where we host quite a few of these webinar sessions. So these are really all compiled within community, where you'll also find blogs, articles on really guidance best practices, but also what's been released in our latest releases. We then also have Now Create. So Now Create can really help you get more information on specific topics that you're looking for. So really also guided step-by-steps for some of the applications we have out there, but also really get an understanding of some of the capabilities that are available within the WSD suite. So just as Paulina was mentioned, the next webinar that we'll be hosting specifically for workplace service delivery that will be also posted on community is happening August 21st. And what we're going to do during this session is really not only take you through what has been released during the July 31st release, but also take you through that experience within an instance, really showing you how those capabilities work together and making sure you get the bigger picture of understanding how those innovation has really brought and enlarged really the experience we have within WSD. So please make sure you register to that session if you haven't already. If you can't make that session, do not worry. That session will also be recorded and posted later on. And of course, if you want to make sure that you get the latest and greatest right away, you can check out the blog that's already been posted directly in the chat. So having said all of that, I want to make sure that I thank everyone for taking the time to be part of the session today. As I mentioned, you're going to be prompted with a quick survey as you leave the Zoom, so make sure to ask any question that you might not have received an answer for today. I know we've got a couple of questions that are still open where we are asking for more context. So please do, if you haven't received a full answer, if you'd like more clarification, use also that survey to reach out to us and we'll make sure to get back to you. If you can also include your email address, which will make it easier for us to follow up if we don't already have it, that would be great. And then having said that, I also want to thank Paulina and Alex for being part of the session and hosting the session with me today. I hope it was useful for everyone and we look forward to seeing everyone really, really soon on our next webinars.